All right. So I want to move on to our next topic. There was an event this week that you and I, being the extremely online Twitter people we are, were watching from afar. And it was a first of its kind, I believe, new conference called the No, they've had it before.
Yeah,
How
it's
old is
the
it?
third annual.
The third annual National Conservatism Conference. And it featured a full cast of characters that we tend to not love. Our nemesis, Josh Hawley, was apparently there. And I think Marco Rubio was speaking. And then it had some more like mainstream people like Ron DeSantis was there. The Heritage Foundation was there, which used to be a pretty
Free market
stalwart.
think tank.
Yeah, pretty known think tank that used to be pretty based. They were there, and there was a lot of interesting commentary going down that I think we should read to our followers. Then you and I can dissect some of the messages that were being sent
Just
out
a
at this
little
conference.
primer, guys. National conservatism is a movement that emerged in recent years as kind of like an alternative to like Reagan style conservatism that was at least in name and in principle, not always in enforcement or practice, was dedicated to capitalism and free trade and free markets and military kind of strength and adventurism, and then some social conservatism, but not super hardcore on many things. And that's kind of what they are saying. We're not that. In fact, they're essentially saying we are big government European style conservatives who want to use the state to advance our idea of a common good that is socially conservative, promotes religion, promotes traditional families, and protects the one income household through almost like progressive economic policies like tariffs and minimum wages and regulations. And so there's a big spectrum of people that fall under this. But in many ways, it's kind of a economically and big government populist social conservative fusion. And then on foreign policy, they're kind of all over the place a little bit, but the general gist is actually more restrained foreign policy. So maybe where there's some overlap there with us, because they're generally not in favor of kind of the war-hungry, adventurous military policy. But so what we're going to do is there's not much video available from this conference, and somebody asked them and they tweeted and they're like, buy a ticket next time. And I'm like, that's kind of smart. But so we're going to read quotes that have been live tweeted out and then react to them. So this first one says, we need to rethink our attitude towards the military and foreign policy. We've sent millions of patriotic young men to die in foreign wars so that the pride flag can fly at American embassies abroad.
But I don't think that's why we've sent people to die.
No, I'm like, the reason I picked this one is this is from one of the speakers. I'm like, this is just so everything that I think is wrong with national conservative movement. It's like they are making a principled point that, maybe there's some merit to, and nope, descended into culture war trolling. Like, please, we did not invade Iraq and Afghanistan to push LGBT values and hang a pride flag. We invaded them because of lies about weapons of mass destruction, because of like fossil fuel interest, like so many things, the reaction to 9/11. But that, like, do we put pride flags at embassies? Yeah, I guess. But like, that is not the root of our nation's military adventurism.
Also,
not even
just that,
close.
Just that's what they're upset about, right? They're not so mad about all the people who've actually died. They're not mad about the wasted money and resources and like all the corruption behind our military industrial complex. They're just mad that the pride flag's flying. Like, that's your hang up. That's your focal point. Like, okay, get your priorities together, guys. Like, come on.
All right.
But that's the thing. That's what they care about most is the culture war. That really is, yeah.
And I don't even always disagree. Sometimes I'm somewhat sympathetic to the culture war complaints, but then they take it really far to the extreme, and it's such an emphasis. But Hannah, what do we got next?
So this one was by Senator Rick Scott, and he said, criminals are not being prosecuted, but police are being executed. Is this the end of America? It could be, but only if we allow it to happen. Sir, what? Like, do you know how rare it is for a cop to be killed in the line of duty? Like, it is excessively rare. And they actually,
that's a good thing.
Very much so, yeah. But like they often will be like, the death rates for cops really spiked in the past 2 years. Yeah, because of COVID. they had a lot of COVID deaths. They weren't like, they had pretty high death rates for COVID. And so make of that what you will. But like the number one way they usually die is suicide. Like they are not being murdered out in the field. That's not what's happening here at all. And when he says criminals aren't being prosecuted, like, what are you talking about? We have, 2 million people in jail. We're prosecuting people every day.
I think
what are you talking
referencing about? A few of these big liberal cities where the prosecutors have really stopped bringing charges on different kinds of things that they want. And I sort of get some of the credit, but it's like kind of like, what universe are you living in where criminals are no longer being prosecuted? That's true in maybe a few places and on some issues, and it could be bad. We could talk about it, but then police are just being executed. There have been a few high profile, like during the Obama years, I remember killings of police, and it's terrible. But this just seemed very demagogic rhetoric. Like this reminded me of the way Democrats talk about school shootings. They're total statistical anomalies, but they want to scare you and make you think this is happening all the time to push their narrative. To me, this kind of like level of kind of fear mongering about crime and police is kind of in the same vein.
Just very inaccurate, but okay. And also I will say it's a good thing that some prosecutors are not always pursuing charges. Prosecutors have always had very wide latitude to determine which charges they move forward with and which ones they don't. And a lot of them have made really bad decisions and locked up a lot of people for nonviolent, victimless crimes. And so, it's not always the case, but some of these prosecutors are doing things like not prosecuting people for weed anymore. That's an excellent check on bad laws.
I think it depends what crime they're not prosecuting.
Yeah, right. Exactly. All right, what's next?
So up next, we've got a quote from Blake Masters, who is an Arizona Republican Senate candidate, who says, on the right, we've got to get comfortable using state power to achieve conservative ends. Libertarianism doesn't work. Totalitarian leftism doesn't work either. And now this quote interested me because this is kind of the impetus or the general gist of the National Conservative movement, this idea that they need to use the government to advance their agenda and protect their idea of socially conservative values. What I don't understand about this, and what they never seem to explain, is how they're going to do that in a democratic, small d republic where to get control of the government, you need majority support, because most hardcore socially conservative views are no longer majority positions. Like many of the speakers at this conference are anti-gay marriage. That is an increasingly small minority position. Many of them are total absolutists, and I'm not saying one way or the other on this, pro-life, ban almost all abortions. That is not a majority position. I mean, most of the things, bring prayer back in schools is not a majority position. Many of the things that they want to do just aren't actually majority opinion, popular things, yet they say they're going to use the government to advance those values. And so I guess my main question is how, unless you're saying like they talk about Viktor Orban in Hungary.
Yeah,
he is not a fan of democracy. He's happy to kind of rig the system or take power. And they're not saying that outright, but is that their plan? Because that would be kind of sus.
They kind of are though, because they are rejecting free market capitalism. And even in this quote, he says, libertarianism doesn't work, totalitarian left doesn't work, but you want a totalitarian right. That's what you actually are after. You're in the minority, you're losing. And these people, they're very afraid people, I think. They feel their way of life and their customs slipping. They feel like they're in the minority. And I think they're very scared of like no longer having the power that they've had over society for many, many decades in this country. And so it's very reactionary as a philosophy. And I think that they do want to use the government to force people back into a way of life that makes them feel safe and comfortable. And so that's why I really get irked with national conservatism. I just think they're basically progressives with stricter social policies. Like, who wants that, right? Like, they don't actually believe in capitalism, and they also like don't want you to be able to live your life free from government intervention. So I think it's a very creepy ideology, and I agree with you. I don't really see it being able to gain traction. I think it's a very small subset that will be attracted to this.
Well, I guess I think it might actually gain traction because I think most people are a little authoritarian. I honestly don't know. It would just need the right leader. It's just a huge jump ball in my mind. But so this one is from a quote from Rachel Bovard, who is a populist policy person, analyst. And she says, wokeism is not a fever that will pass, but a cancer that must be eradicated. And the free market won't do it. So I am not a fan of wokeness, right? Like far left identity politics, all the excessive snowflakery, just, all the nonsense that we talk about pretty regularly. But this disturbs me, this statement. It must be eradicated. What you're saying is that ideas and beliefs must be eradicated by the government. That's authoritarian, right? Like that is not free speech. That is not free expression. That is pretty chilling. And it's also not going to work out well for people who hold kind of fringe views on a lot of social issues to say that unpopular opinions, the government's going to just come in and shut them down. I mean, because she's saying the free market can't. Well, the free market of ideas can if you convince people. Well, you're failing to do that. We're failing to do that on some issues, but we're trying to do better. Her solution is, okay, well, let's just shut down the debate because we can't win it. And I'm just saying that I think is a betrayal of values, any semblance of values, limited government, free speech. And I also think it's a very short-term, self-sabotaging idea in the long run, because a lot of the values of the national conservative crowd are not popular. So you really want to start eradicating unpopular ideas, that's going to backfire on you real quick.
Yeah, it's not going to go the way that they think it will. And I think it, again, traces back to this. They know they're losing, right? They know they're losing in society. They cannot debate. They cannot convince people to live the life that they want them to live. And so therefore they want to use force. And I think that makes you a creep. Like, I think it's very weird to be so concerned with how other people live their life and to be so afraid. Like, I think wokeism's stupid. And I worked for a left-wing company for a little bit. I had to sit in plenty of kumbaya circles. Like, I can tell you firsthand how like ridiculous it can get. But that being said, it doesn't impact me actually. Like, if somebody else is like super woke and way over here and like wants to spend their time debating, racial philosophies and like communism, I'm not threatened by that, because I know that free market capitalism and individual liberty and limited government values can actually debate those things and actually win out for the marketplace of ideas. And I have enough, faith in my actual, not only principles, but also my ability to have conversations and reach across the aisle and talk to people, that I'm not scared of wokeism. But these people are scared because I think they lack those abilities.
I wouldn't say I'm scared of it, but I do think, the woke left is trying to force it onto other people. They're not just they're not playing fair in the free exchange of ideas, right? I mean, they're trying to get people fired who disagree with them and deplatform people and silence people. And so I think that the cause for concern is not illegitimate. The alarm is not illegitimate, but perhaps it's a bit hyperbolic. But it's kind of this become what you hate thing. Like, when I see people ripping up the rules and playing dirty, my response is not, well, I should also compromise my principles. I should lower myself to their level to fight back, because I think you're just going to degrade yourself and degrade society and our norms further. And I think that you have to have faith in your ability to actually stay true to what you believe in and win. And actually, a lot of wokeism isn't very popular, right? You ask Black people, and they overwhelmingly say there's too much political correctness in this country. Right? You ask Democrats, a majority will even agree with that. So it's like their debate is here to be won. But if you're just, too off-put that you decide to rip up the rule book and just go censor a bunch of people, well, you're not going to have power forever, and you're going to learn to regret that decision. So,
and what's there to attract those people who are in the middle, who are gettable, right? Like, you're just behaving just like the people that you want to convince people are so bad. There's no alternative, right? You're both bad. So I'm not going to be attracted to join either cause. And I think that's where a lot of people are, where it's like, yeah, I hate some of what the left's doing. I think it's not very smart. And I think that it can be, as you pointed out, it can have an underbelly to it. But you don't defeat those kinds of actions or those kinds of ideas by just becoming more of that on the other side, right? That's a losing philosophy, and that's not going to really give you the ability to attract new people. So, all right, another person said, where did it go? Here it is. This is Joe Rigney. I don't know who that is. Do you know who that is?
No, but I get the impression he's like an ultra social conservative.
Okay. He said, if we want to resist the fantasy and folly that Rachel Levine is a woman, we must resist the fantasy and folly that two men can pretend to be married to one another.
So I can explain this one. Rachel Levine is a Biden official who is transgender and who identifies as a woman, was born as a biological male. And Rachel Levine is a controversial figure for many reasons. But the right is obsessed with Levine because it's a trans person in a health department role, and they're like, you don't even know your own gender, blah blah blah, whatever. Cabin that for a moment. There was actually, with this speaker and a few others, a pretty noticeable anti-gay marriage sentiment at this conference, which is not something you'd see much of these days, even at like a CPAC or a Republican convention, because a majority of Republicans actually now support gay marriage, and young Republicans overwhelmingly. But they essentially, this guy's argument, I looked at more of his remarks, was that you can't have the radical gender stuff that we're seeing now, right? The Zers, non-binary, trans, femme, whatever, use my pronouns, or it's literally violence, like there's no differences in sports, just kind of all this lunacy that we're seeing on the far left of this movement. He's like, well, actually, you can't even have gay marriage or gay people. If you accept that, you must accept that. I just flatly think that's wrong. I've always said that gay sexual orientation and gender identity really shouldn't even be grouped. They're pretty distinct concepts. And actually, most of the American public's position is generally pro-gay and then skeptical of the more extreme trans stuff, the transitioning minors, the sports competitions. And so I just thought this was wrong and out of touch. And yeah, I don't know. I really didn't like this speaker and how far he was leaning into the anti-gay culture. It's like, go back to Pat Buchanan or whatever. You're a couple decades late on this one, bub.
Yeah, again, why do you care? But I think it's funny they said two men can pretend to be married. Like, no, but they actually are married. Like, it's not pretending to be married. What are you talking about? Like,
well, he's saying that in God's eyes, it's not a real marriage.
All right. I mean, but it's an actual marriage. So like, move on. And I come from like these Christian backgrounds, but if that's what you truly believe, and I don't, but like, that's still just your faith. There are plenty of other people outside your faith, plenty of other people who think their God is just fine with gay marriage. And like, it's just this actual superiority complex I feel that they have, where it's like, because I believe this, because my religion believes this, it should be the dominant prevailing belief throughout society. And this is how we should actually apply all of government and public policy. And that is such an icky side of religion that I really detest. And I think that it's so like narrow-minded and so just uncultured and unaware of like the experiences of other people in the country, and just very not cosmopolitan at all.
Yeah, my belief has always been that like people should be able to have whatever beliefs about gay marriage they want. Like, I don't think that a church that's more traditional should be forced to perform or recognize gay marriages. Absolutely not. My only thing has always just been that like the law should treat everyone equally, and then people can decide for themselves what they think marriage is. And if you don't like marriage, a gay marriage, you don't believe in it or agree with it, no one's forcing you to get gay married. But more importantly, belong to a church that doesn't do it, that doesn't recognize it. That's fine. I mean, I might not morally love that, but that's well within your rights. The problem is that folks like this think that their belief should be superimposed on society through the law. And I think that's just wrong. I just don't support that.
Mm-hmm. All right. The last one we have is by Scott Yenor, not sure how you say his last name, but he said, pornography is a great tool to make sure you don't have high thoughts or high ambitions. A tyrant loves it. I thought this was interesting because these people hate porn at a level that like, I'm trying to track. Like, I think the porn industry has some problems clearly, but as a whole, like, I don't really spend a whole lot of time staying up late at night and worrying about other people watching porn. If you think porn's bad, don't watch it. These people hate porn. Like, they want to see porn banned. They think that it's like this huge, I'm like, do you guys all have a secret porn addiction or something? Like, how did you get high key up here on this issue?
I mean, I do think there's problems with it. Like, there's legitimate concerns about porn consumption, the type of porn, the way it glorifies a lot of violence or very negative things towards women and the messages it sends. And there's lots of legitimate concerns to be had, though I'm certainly not a ban person. But this is just so hyperbolic. Tyrants love porn. Porn keeps it like all across this country right now. There's just millions of people who do sometimes watch pornography, and they're not somehow enslaved and prevented from high ambitions or high thoughts. It's just like, what? Maybe you have a special problem with this stuff that really holds you back, and you should talk to someone about that. I'm not even judging, but just like, you're a little bit alarmist here, folks.
Yeah. It gives closeted issues vibes to me. Like, I just think I don't understand why you're so bent out of shape unless you actually have a problem with this. And if you do, you're right. There's people should get help. Porn addiction can be a real thing.
Yeah, that's
if it
valid.
becomes that, like, then absolutely seek help, just as you would seek help for any other addiction that you got. But that doesn't mean the vast majority of people are at that level with it, or that, you know, that this is something that's just a huge corrosion on society. I don't think it's
also
that deep.
just historically, I don't think most tyrants embraced porn, actually. I think there were a lot of bans on pornography from tyrants, actually.